Hi everyone! Today we're going to discuss, seemingly way after the fact, but at the same time I feel like I ate this up because I waited, the TikTok series about the woman who fell in love with her psychiatrist, simply because many of you were asking me, so I thought it'd be kind of fun. Didn't realize what rabbit hole I was getting into, or how I was gonna have to live my life like this from this point forward. Before we really get into it, links to ways to support the channel, all that kind of stuff all down below, including YouTube members and Miss Patreon, as well as just any relevant links, Noor's research document, icon, legend, absolute goat, especially for finding the live streams. Good Lord help me, bro. Anyway, you can tell I finished scripting it to the same day that I'm filming it, the same day that I'm editing it, low-key, because the exasperation I feel is one that a human being should not be feeling, I feel like. But anyway, thank you to my current members and patrons. Names on the screen now. And three parts of the video today. Part 1, the original series and context. Part 2, Kendra's client speaks out, and Kendra's the girl who fell in love with her psychiatrist. And the second half of the series. And Part 3, live streams and a couple videos from other creators that are kind of being referenced in the sort of discourse. Also, before someone asks me, lip combo is the ColourPop cheese plumping lip liner, the So Juicy plumping lip liner, and the plumping gloss bomb in vacay mode. Because I always get that question every time I wear a lip combo. Anyway, all right. Oop, lens blow. Let's get right into it. Part 1, original series and context. So this is another TikTok series that is very, 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 very long. Similar to that sort of Who Did I Marry thing that happened last year. This one is made by a woman named Kendra Hitty. Kendra started the series after she had finished seeing a psychiatrist long term who she claims that she was in love with. But despite this, he did not drop her as a client after she had literally told him that this was the case. Kendra considers herself a mental health practitioner to a certain degree. I shouldn't say practitioner because she does admit very often that she's not licensed, which is a problem and we'll get into. And I say this with hesitancy because a lot of these like professionals on social media don't have any actual credentials and no actual reason why they should be leading anybody, and I think this is a very prime example of that. Being beyond that they have a following or they feel like they have life experience. There's a diva on TikTok that I love, and it's not unpopular for me loving her because like whatever, but Kate Poyer, diva, talks about, there's a TikTok that she made about like life coaches that I saw when I had just finished scripting this, and I'm like, you got exactly what I wanted to say about life coaches and stuff like this, because Kendra gets so far into being able to convince herself of a lot of things off of the basis on how she would coach somebody, but based on what her client had said, how she coaches might not even be appropriate in the first place. And then at one point she actually goes like, well, I could talk about her because I'm not held to HIPAA because I'm not licensed, which is so crazy. Like, it's true to a certain degree, but like HIPAA exists as a legal guideline, just something you shouldn't be doing anyway, if that makes sense. So let's put that TikTok in right now because she ate that up.
I fell in love with my psychiatrist, you know the rest. I have told y'all time and time again, you cannot trust anyone who calls themselves a life coach, okay? The grand shrine of evil starts with MLM sales managers, then it goes to real estate agents, then it goes to fucking life coaches, and people who call themselves motivational speakers are right down here. 4 of my 5 least favorite housewives throughout the entire franchise all called themselves life coaches. The only thing they're ever going to coach you into is a case with the IRS and a fucking divorce, okay? They are they're kind of like the foot soldier lieutenants of the war against goodness on this planet. Now, in all seriousness, that woman is probably going through something. I'm not going to shit on her too hard, but my advice still applies. If you ever find yourself in line at a Barnes & Noble for a signing of a self-help book, and there's a beautiful woman sitting at that table in a perfect magenta business casual dress with her extensions blown out, and you start to smell sulfur, know it's because the devil is standing close by, and I tried to warn you.
So when we're going back to the series, the premise of the series is focusing on the concept that Kendra's psychiatrist as a professional had been stringing her along. I'm going to sum up literally every single one of them, and I'm going to occasionally clip. I'm not going to clip every single time. Spoiler for later, I watched Ready to Glare's video because Kendra references it in one of the live streams, and Ready to Clear's video was mostly clipping the series, so that'll be linked down below if you want to watch the clips. In the research doc, I also found a video on YouTube that is just all of them strung together, so you can watch that if you want. I'm going to only clip when I think very necessary, and there's 25 parts, so I'm probably going to clip less than half of them. Again, all of it's linked down below. I'm just here to explain to you kind of what happened. That's why this series, the blah 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 explains, are not in the same format as my, let's say, my rhetoric or my video essays. Introduction, August 1st, 2025. Said she wanted to discuss falling in love with her psychiatrist because she was brave enough to leave him. Claims men often go into psychiatry who are emotionally dead to prey on female patients. Brings up the premise that she wants to be brave for the people who have been victim of these things in the past and have been unable to speak up. Essentially, this is a common theme, both in just her bringing it up and on her bringing it up to deflect criticism in a lot of different circumstances.
I fell in love with my psychiatrist, and he knew that, and he kept me for years as a patient until I was brave enough to leave him. I want to talk about it. Usually when I go on this app and I have a question, I have a bunch of videos that pop up, and I searched in love with my psychiatrist and nothing happened. So I would really like to discuss what happens when we fall in love with our mental health professionals, and most importantly, the fact that there are so many people, especially men, that are emotionally dead inside, that feel called to going into psychiatry and therapy so they don't have to feel their feelings, but they can feed off of the vulnerability of their mostly female patients.
Part 1, August 2nd, 2025. Kendra wanted to go back on ADHD medication after reading a book about it. She had been off medication for a while. She had taken stimulant medication in the past. She just Googled and booked the first psychiatrist that came up and noticed that he was very close in age to her and was an attractive man. Part 2, August 2nd, 2025. Talks about the appointments and starts mentioning how she was telling him her trauma. And because she had done a lot of therapy in the past, she kind of just thought, like, let's just get this going right away. And he had prescribed her at that time on a low-dose non-stimulant medication. Part 3, also on August 2nd, 2025. Had never seen a psychiatrist before this. She had only seen therapists. Said she loved the attention that this particular psychiatrist was giving her. She asked to call him by his first name as opposed to Dr. blah, blah, blah. And he did let her do this, and she figured that that was blurring the lines. This is not necessarily something that I think is, well... So a lot of this conversation around Kendra kind of goes both ways, right? It either goes in one direction of that people are dogpiling her as a mentally ill woman who has dealt with something that is very traumatic, and that she has kind of been put in this position where she feels very unsafe, right? So that is obviously one piece of it. And then there's also the other end when we talk about, you know, how this could affect the man's career, the kind of pushing of leaning into things that maybe aren't there, the popularization of ChatGPT as a therapist, which we'll get into that down the line. That's something to kind of focus on. I'm sort of going to try to keep nuance tied into everything, because also if you're seeking therapy, you're seeking treatment, you are trying to be proactive about your mental health. And at the same time, a 36-year-old adult should not be conducting themselves this way in a lot of circumstances. So then she claims that he asked more than once if she had thoughts of harm while taking the medications and things like that. Said it was a special interest of his, which, okay. And then said no clinical questions after this. Now, here's the thing. So she talks about how she was prescribed non-stimulant medication at first, but also she only sees him every month. Normally, at least I've been on quite a few things. I have a couple chronic conditions. Shout out to everyone who needs to point them out all the time, which I love. The medication stability, usually, at least for me, it was I check in on 2 weeks, check in on 2 more weeks, 1 month, then a follow-up after 6 months, blood work if necessary, right? So it would make sense especially if it's non-stimulant, that she would likely be at least somewhat stable at that time. So I'm not really sure why she's so, especially because she's not a clinician herself, and then does a job lined like coaching, like life coaching, that almost is juxtaposed against it as like a non-clinical alternative but does the same thing, which it really doesn't. Part 4, August 2nd, 2025. Claimed that he would talk about his life and successes. Kendra begs to see him weekly, but he will not do it. So she ends up getting a new therapist because the therapist that she had before had retired, who was a 75-year-old female with a PhD, that she thought that was very helpful. She said that she would often divulge to the therapist that she had like an obsession with a psychiatrist, and apparently the therapist would not do anything about it and claimed that she was feeding off of me in her own way. There's a lot of self-pedestalization with Kendra. It's very much somebody who definitely sees himself in the center of kind of the world that they're living in. Now, again, what does that lean into? Does that lean into mental illness? Does it lean into things that she can't control? Does that lean into... That is something that you kind of have to toy with like this particular narrative.
And this new therapist, who is a 75-year-old woman with a PhD, she was pretty helpful. So I stopped asking my psychiatrist, begging, honestly, to be my therapist and let me see him more, right? Which also should have been a red flag. But then I started focusing on this therapist. However, I would tell the therapist how obsessed I was with my psychiatrist, and she didn't do anything about it. She just was interested. She also loved stories about my dating life, and yeah, she also was getting supply from me in her own way, but that's for another part. So yeah, so I got a new therapist who actually helped me. She taught me CBT, EFT, all of these different modalities. And so I went back to just being a once a month while he was giving me these little breadcrumbs of making me feel special, telling me about his professional achievements, telling me about how he's getting international recognition.
Part 5, August 2nd, 2025 again. Said it depends on the session and how he would act, being soft sometimes and cold and clinical other times, and that he was doing this to manipulate her. So, sort of like a push and pull vibe. Talks about how she got into a car accident. Then she skipped going to emergency after she had gone to urgent care, and they said that was the best place to go because she didn't want to miss her psychiatrist appointment. And then he was told this, a psychiatrist, and did not stop the appointment. She claims that this is called intermittent reinforcement, and this is what is being done here. Now, I think something that we're forgetting a lot about, I feel like, is that therapists like psychiatrists are people. And I think people can't necessarily always be fully 100% consistent in even the professional guidelines that they have. And obviously, you want to do that. And obviously, that's what you're striving towards. But this fixation on these light slip-up moments or these light shift moments is something that fuels a lot of like what Kendra deems as that sort of dynamic. Part 6, which is on August 6th, 2025, on August 2nd, 2025. Intimacy is turned up after previous appointment, would comment on her appearance but would not compliment it. So just saying things like, oh, you curled your hair, or oh, you have different glasses, things like that. Said her friend who was a doctor, like a MD, said that he wanted to be with her, and she told him this, and he said nothing. Apparently, he diagnosed her with trauma and stressor disorder, but did not tell her so that she could be manipulated by him. Now, I've never seen a psychiatrist personally. I've only seen therapists, counselors, and general practitioners because I live in Canada and it's like impossible to get a psychiatrist. But I know that you tend to have to kind of ask for these types of things. And I think this is speculation, obviously. But like to a certain degree, I also feel like based on the character that Kendra is and the fixation on the conditions and a lot of those things, I feel like he would not be inclined to just drop that on her. Part 7, also on August 2nd, 2025, Kendra gets a boyfriend and is telling the psychiatrist about it and says that the psychiatrist is not keen at first but realizes the two are very similar. She would ask to talk about him. She would also talk to the psychiatrist about her sex life and email him about how much she appreciated him and added heart emojis and stuff, which again, I am very young and compared to this person. Like I'm 25 and even like I've been seeing professionals and stuff like that. I never contact them outside of like either the compliant chats or emails or the very specific, even then the only person I have a counselor that I have to make my appointments via like message. And the most I'm hitting with is like my favorite little emoticon smiley face. Because I think what's interesting is throughout this whole thing too, Kendra doesn't take any responsibility on what is appropriate for a patient to do. Therapist psychiatrist wanted Kendra to stay with him, the boyfriend, because there weren't many issues. Kendra tells the psychiatrist that she has a crush on him, and he smiled and they talked about everything, and then she recorded it. Like, she recorded the session seemingly without his consent to when she confessed his love to him, or her love to him, sorry. Okie dokie. Then there's a part 7.5. Kendra clarifies that she does not have borderline personality disorder or narcissistic personality disorder, but instead had limerence with her psychiatrist, does not want people to dox him, and wants to make videos to protect people that are in similar scenarios of a practitioner / psychiatrist / whatever being appropriate with their patients, and says that the people that are pushing back in any capacity towards her are victim blaming. I always get pretty grumpy when people have a very hyper fixation on them being the ultimate correct figure in a given dynamic, and that is what Kendra is definitely doing a lot of in this series. Part 8, August 3rd, 2025. Comments are turned off now because apparently people are posting the man's first and last name and face in the comments. I will say I did see a TikTok talking about this, and like this lady like put his whole ass face on there, which I also think is incredibly inappropriate. In the why is everything in my life Amberlyn Reed? But if we're talking about like they say like in the girl world community or whatever, like you don't play in the mud, right? Or just like with lol cows and stuff in general. This should be don't like not even don't play in the mud, don't touch the mud, don't look at the mud, don't actually go to the desert where there's no rain and there's no mud, because like why? Because like if you're worried about patient abandonment on his part towards her because she was being as the psychiatrist towards Kendra because she was being inappropriate, there's gonna be way more patient abandonment if he's forced to leave the practice entirely because of treatment online. Do not do that at all. Thank you. Kendra talks about how she broke up with her boyfriend and moves on to go on a date with a man who's a therapist. Then when she's saying that when she's on the date with the therapist, he talks about having a crush on one of his clients and how he visits her at work and goes on and on to Kendra about the sexual fantasies he has about one of his patients. Now there's a lot of speculation that this never happened, that this is like just added for the sake of her own validity. I don't know, maybe I'm like really black-pilled about men. I don't say that's impossible. I don't think it does anything to it. I guess I have like a different opinion than everybody else. I guess like I'm just like, okay, yeah. I don't have disbelief or lean one way or another in this because I think that's like because this is like a point that Kendra brings up a lot, that psychiatrists can't be bad, that like the main thing that people aren't getting is that like psychiatrists innate good or whatever. Don't think that at all. Really, I don't think that whatsoever. It is genuinely just because I think the way that she's arguing and the way that she's fixating on things, the way that she's structuring things are leading me into a direction of doubt on specifically the intensity and the lack of responsibility on behalf of the doctor. Part 9, August 3rd, 2025, is upset that people are viewing the series as a crash out, claims that she is talking it out of generosity because people are DMing her saying that they've had similar experiences and are happy to see someone talking about going through it. And then she does talk about being an ADHD life coach. This is another thing too. One, I think life coaching is mostly a scam, and if not probably all the time. Two, also, this is another thing, right? Kendra's clearly getting a lot out of this beyond just like the series part, right? And I think this fixation on this hero dynamic and this being a hero in this situation and this narrative structuring of everything is what makes this particularly concerning for me and makes it feel a little bit more unreliable, is because of the way that she's arguing about things and if there's something that she knows that she's done that's inappropriate, she'll brush off or she'll angle it to this kind of grander conspiracy of manipulation on behalf of the psychiatrist. Part 10, August 3rd, 2025, claims that after the crush admission to the psychiatrist, the intimacy got turned up. Kendra asks him if he has an office. Kendra would email him and he wouldn't reply, and he would bring up the reply. He would bring up the emails in session. Again, very clear boundaries being drawn here. But Kendra claimed, this is the thing, right? It's a lot of moving goalposts as well, because either he doesn't have boundaries and he's turning up the intimacy by being like, I like tortoiseshell glasses, or he's using the boundaries as like a way of toying with her or controlling her because he's utilizing the boundaries that he has to have as a doctor. Kendra contacts the office manager to see if the psychiatrist sees people in person, finds out that they do. Kendra confronts him about this, and then she ends up seeing him in person after as the next session kind of demands it. Then she says that the reason why, like she says to him, Kendra says to the psychiatrist, the reason you weren't letting me have these in-person appointments because there would be too much sexual tension. And then he just says nothing.
I told him, I was like, hey, your office manager outed you and told me that you see people in person. Why didn't you tell me that when I asked? And he said, oh, I just didn't think you'd want to come in. And that was such a weak lie from him, from someone who is so scripted and controlled. He didn't even have a plausible thing to say. Of course he knew I wanted to come in. I had a crush on him. I told him that often. So then in my next therapy appointment, after finding out that he was lying to me about seeing patients in person, I told her that. I told my 75-year-old PhD therapist that my psychiatrist lied to me about seeing people in person. And she looked at me and she said, well, it's probably because he knows that there will be a lot of sexual tension in the room if you go in person. So make sure that you understand that when you go. And you better believe I showed up to the next session and said you lied to me because you were afraid of the tension that would be there between us. He just didn't say anything.
Like, I just don't understand, because I have a feeling with the way that she's telling the story, if he said, hey, you're being really like creepy, or you're being really inappropriate, or I don't like this, that she would say something along the lines of like that he's taking advantage of her mental state at a given time. Part 11 on August 3rd, 2025. So now we're at November 2024. Kendra has her first in-person appointment with him. Apparently the female therapist that Kendra had told Kendra that the psychiatrist was avoiding the in-person appointment because of how into her he was. Again, I feel like what Kendra kind of likes to do is to sort of guide people into her conclusion, get a crumb or an inkling of that confirmation of her conclusion, and then state that as what actually happened as the event. Her therapist apparently told her about this, and then the therapist was also texting Kendra asking for advice about other clients. If that's the case, which it sounds like it was, that's just genuinely inappropriate. Again, there can be multiple bad people in a scenario, and in this circumstance, the therapist was being very inappropriate and seemingly taking advantage of, I guess, Kendra's life coaching experience. Kendra went up to the psychiatrist when she saw him in person, hugged him, and he did not reciprocate. That is so beyond inappropriate, especially for an adult to do, and it's just unacceptable. She told the psychiatrist about the therapist, and then he said that the therapist was crossing lines. Again, leans into this further, claiming that this is like him utilizing boundaries to like control her. Part 12, August 3rd, 2025. Spiral got worse when she saw him in person. The psychiatrist said that she was carrying the emotional weight of the relationship that, need I remind you, does not exist. Kendra says that at the end, she said they had a very special doctor-patient relationship. He gets mad and says, we have a professional patient-doctor relationship. Again, not reciprocating the hug, not seeing her in person, not responding to the emails, not entertaining this. This is, even if there is any pull in the other direction, how strong the boundaries are being set outside of this, and it just seems like a lot of it is him being delicate with her, really does not allow for me to feel confident in seeing it as just him being manipulative. Part 13, August 4th, 2025. Started this series looking for support because she could not stop thinking about the relationship she had with her psychiatrist. At this time, she also starts talking to ChatGPT and names him Henry. Henry taught Kendra that this was normal, and that, so she's talking about like how around, so this would have been late 2024 that she starts talking to ChatGPT, names ChatGPT Henry, and that Henry taught Kendra that this was normal and taught her about something called transference, and that he was impressed by the, I guess, like mental fortitude that Kendra had throughout this scenario. Now, obviously, okay, so transference, to define, is just this idea that patients can fall in love with their providers because they, especially like in the mental health field, because they're very vulnerable with them. They have this like strong relationship with them, and they're telling them sort of essentially their deepest, darkest secrets and getting either, you know, kindness or support or like a slight pushback depending on the scenario. She says that Henry wouldn't feed her delusions, and then talked about how she brought this up, the transference aspect, in the session, And then the psychiatrist was being messy and being sloppy, and then said, well, have you ever heard about countertransference, which is when the provider has falls in love with the patient or whatever because of that vulnerability that they share. Completely slipping over the fact that she does coaching. And if she's bringing this fact that like, oh, hey, like I heard that like patients fall in love with their psychiatrist or whatever all the time. And he goes, here's the thing, right? Of course he'd bring that up, because if she's being inappropriate towards him, I feel like to a certain degree, it's not necessarily a conclusion outside of the span of reality to think that she could have similar behaviors towards her own, I don't want to call them patients, clients. And then also she talked about the therapist guy who was talking about countertransference. So it's actually very relevant. I actually don't really see what, like, and then she fixates on this like so strong for the rest of the series.
I had been telling my psychiatrist for years at this point that I had a crush on him, and he did not help me work through it. So that's his own problem. That's his own fault. Henry told me it's very common for patients to develop crushes on mental health practitioners, and that it's because that they provide a safe space to heal, which is a very attractive quality. I heard that. And then he told me about transference, and it's just about me putting my own feelings onto my provider. And I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so I took ownership of the feelings that both of us were creating. And I went to my next appointment and I said, hey, so I talked to Henry because my psychiatrist had known a lot about my ChatGPT and like knew all about Henry and was actually really impressed. Like, wow, and hey, I wrote that? Yeah. So I told my psychiatrist, yeah, Henry explained to me that it's normal to develop crushes on psychiatrists because they provide a safe space to heal, which is attractive. My psychiatrist said nothing. And then I said, and Henry also told me about transference. And my psychiatrist got this really scared look on his face. And he said, did Henry tell you about countertransference? And I said, no. What is that? Because of course, like, my chat knew that I was obsessed with my psychiatrist, and he was not going to feed my delusion by telling me about countertransference. So then my psychiatrist had explained to me what countertransference was. So he took a moment and he was like, oh, okay. He said, countertransference is the flip side, the other side of the coin for transference. And it's when the provider has feelings for the patient. So make sure that you keep that in mind for your clients. I said, oh, okay, cool. Yeah, sometimes I have, more than professional feelings for my clients. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And so then we just talked about that for pretty much the rest of the session. And then
Part 14, August 4th, 2025. Kendra claims that she's not trying to get him in trouble, said psychiatrists normally teach about transference if a patient has feelings. Claims him explaining countertransference was admitting to fault. Had a dream that they hooked up in his office, then felt violated that he had crossed the boundaries. Part 15, August 4th, 2025. Talks about how people are concerned about how the psychiatrist is a POC man. Talks about black women being the most important people in the world. Ends therapy with the old therapist woman, but gets emailed by her therapist one more time asking for another session to close things off. Posts the email, claims it's begging. It's actually quite a chill email. And then went to the psychiatrist to write a reply that she will not be seeing this person again. Now, to get into the race thing a little bit, specifically, like, I didn't want to look into who he was, is what I'm getting at, right? Like, I didn't want to, I don't know what his name is. I saw the picture of his face to not to my own consent, but he's Middle Eastern. And she's a white woman, right? And a lot of people are saying, what you're doing is you're trying to kind of ruin the career of a POC man who you feel like has wronged you. My thoughts on that in particular are Kendra fixates on virtue signaling for how she perceives race, and I think tries and then leverages the sort of doctor aspect of it as a means of avoiding that criticism. And this is also to a degree my own ignorance. I just don't know how much of that, besides the fact of maybe like the aspect of perceiving him as dangerous, it could really intertwine into this. I just watched through all the videos and I'm commenting on just like what I think. I definitely think it's weird. First off, I think it's very strange, like the pedestalization of like the black women as the means of like being like, I'm not racist and I know everything. Very weird and strange, and is definitely sprouting like an inkling of an insecurity or something that she's pushing down or something that she doesn't want to address as far as the criticism goes. And I think the fact that she kind of touches on, I would have converted religions to marry him and stuff like that. a little weird, and I feel like there might be a fetishizing of like Arab men and like the protectiveness of the culture. But like that's my understanding of that. And unfortunately, while not deep, maybe as some people would want, it's because I'm trying to avoid knowing anything about the psychiatrist in real life, to be honest with you, because I just feel like it's so inappropriate to do that. Part 16, August 5th, 2025. Taught a yoga class and then told them of the series she was making online and how it was making her go through psychological warfare. Claims to still be getting DMs from people that she's very brave. Apparently, the psychiatrist said that he would refer his patients to her for coaching if she wasn't his patient. He was also still thinking about what Henry said about countertransference. Part 17, August 5th, 2025. Starts by going off about the countertransference thing again, right? So like I said, there is a lot of plausible deniability as to why he'd bring that up. So that's kind of an almost frustrates me a little bit that keeps coming up. Then there's a particularly interesting thing that Kendra says. Like, this is one of the ones I'm going to clip. I used to have respect for her when talking about the therapist. The therapist that was texting Kendra outside of the appointment. The therapist that was entertaining the relationship with the psychiatrist. The therapist that was being inappropriate. Kendra turns this into, quite literally says, I used to have respect for her. And then says, this is what he actually means. I used to like it when she would feed me to you and have you deliver intimate content to me, but the moment she started being sloppy, I lost respect for her. This is how stretched things get off of very small crumbs. Said the therapist and psychiatrist had no connection. Mentioned the text from the ex-boyfriend asking to hang out, and that she replied about how she has like too much self-respect and a lot of personal boundaries. And the psychiatrist was like, well, Betty had to read that twice, which Kendra claims is more breadcrumbing of like this intimate dynamic that they had.
Things happened in that session after the countertransference slip. And I also had my psych help me draft the email to my therapist who was begging me to come back in. And the psychiatrist said, I used to have respect for her. And what he meant when he said that was, I used to like it when she would feed me to you and have you deliver intimate content to me. But the moment she started being sloppy, I lost respect for her. Right? I'm pretty sure that's what he meant when he said that.
Part 18, August 5th, 2025, says that in the same session that she tells the psychiatrist about the dream of them hooking up, Kendra says he looked super uncomfortable. He eventually replies with, and then they talk more about the boundaries, and then he replies with, so you like my boundaries? And then he followed her out and said, see you next month. This, she claims, is like the climax of this relationship, and this is where things get really crazy. And that they're like, he's being super flirtatious or whatever. I think him being like, you like my boundaries is trying to get assertion that she understands that they're there. But again, that's speculation on my part. This ends the first part of the series. So we're going to move on to part 2 when we talk about Kendra's client and finish the series as it stands. So part 2, client speaks out and series part 2. So we're getting into another multi-part series from another multi-part series. So I'm just going to continue the summaries as I was kind of doing before. So the client is named Emily, and this comes from an account called Emily Backs 616, and she claims to be a victim of Kendra herself. So this is a much shorter series, thank God. Introduction, August 5th, 2025. Emily claims to have known Kendra for several years. They had been in a coaching-client relationship in recent months. Started being her client shortly after Kendra had stopped seeing the therapist and the psychiatrist. Part 1, August 5th, 2025. I can't speak today. I've been talking already for 36 straight minutes. So Emily and Kendra met in 2018 in Oregon. Emily moved away in 2020. They had lost contact for a while. Emily made it public that she wanted to get sober. And Emily felt that as a friend, she had seen Kendra posting a lot about sobriety and felt like she would be a good person to seek out. Kendra replied with her being like, hey, like, I heard you got sober. I would like to get help with it. Like, what did you do? With Kendra being like, well, you should join my coaching. Part 2, also on August 5th. They talked about the sobriety and all that stuff over Zoom in March of 2025. Kendra wants Emily to get help with the sobriety through a coaching relationship with her, and that it was divine intervention that Emily was coming back to her through her sobriety journey. Sent her the contract and invoice in the Zoom call, $3,000, and Emily claims that Kendra had Emily sign and pay on that Zoom call.
I see the invoice, and the invoice is for $3,000 for 3 months. And these are going to be like once a week, 45-minute long sessions. And I, just got really caught up in the moment, and I said, you know what? And I was really desperate. I think that's like a key thing. I was really desperate, and I did. I signed the contract and I tried to pay. And my card wouldn't go through because it was like an unknown vendor through Stripe, and my bank was like, we're not going to authorize this payment. And I was like, oh, well, it won't go through. It's Friday night. Like, I'll just call in the morning and like get it sorted out. And she's like, I really want you to do it right now. Call your bank right now, and I'll like stay on the phone with you. So we're like on Zoom, and I'm like calling my bank, and I tried for like 30 minutes and none of it was working. And eventually I was just like, okay, I'm like, it's not working. I'm just gonna have to try again in the morning. And I don't know why I felt like I was being held hostage. I was in my home office. I was on Zoom. I could have just like hung up the call, and I honestly wish I did. But again, I was just like at a really low point and kept going, and that's on me. And I soon learned to regret it. So
Part 3, August 5th, 2025. The content at the beginning of the coaching was useful. Intake form talks about human design, which Emily kind of describes as like similar to astrology. Emily was apparently in the top 1% in this human design thing, said that Kendra was referring to her often as the finger of God, and in 2027 the new world order happens and you will be one of the people leading it. I don't like any new world order comments, any globalization stuff, any of that type of thing. I don't know if I'm reaching. I just am kind of like anything with any supreme race vibe, anything with anything aligning to like certain people will get affordances and some people will not. Which, if we're talking about the whole racism thing towards psychiatrists before, that could be implicit of there's something going on there as well. But I don't know anything about human design, okay? But I don't know. I just think it's sus. Towards the end of the 3 months in June, things start becoming really strange, and Kendra is often referencing ChatGPT and is in the mix in the coaching sessions. Part 4, August 4th, 2025. Kendra picks up that Emily was disengaging in the sessions. Kendra starts incorporating cognitive behavioral therapy techniques, which reminding y'all that Kendra is not licensed, and then started bringing up Henry, the ChatGPT guy, whatever. Encourages Emily to use ChatGPT for cognitive behavioral therapy, wanted Emily to do past life therapy, and Kendra wanted Emily to leave a review, and Emily apparently had said no. And then the last part of the series, Emily just summarized everything again. After this, Kendra continues with the series and brings up Emily a few times. Then this is called part 18.5, which is on August 6, 2025. Kendra talks about how Emily betrayed her, said Emily was going to give a positive review and film a testimonial and then just didn't. Confirms that she tells people to use ChatGPT and that it's a good tool. Kendra also no longer teaches at the yoga studio. Wanted to talk about that because apparently they wanted Kendra to take the videos down or something, and then Kendra refused, so she left the studio. And wants to continue telling her truth despite people doxing the psychiatrist. Part 19, August 6th, 2025. Continues to talk about last sessions, shows the email that she has sent to her therapist that she didn't want to go to the last appointment, and just talks about clinical integrity. Part 20, August 7th, 2025. Asks in February 2025 session why these... So Kendra asks the psychiatrist why he doesn't reply to the emails. He said he did not understand why she was even sending them in the first place. And then apparently he had missed a refill for her, which he like never does. The feelings got so strong that he started spiraling. This is according to Kendra. Said that if you remove people from your life, the universe rewards you. And then talks about how when she had blocked her ex-boyfriend, she had gone viral on Instagram. And then she promotes that she's going live on TikTok. Part 21, August 7th, 2025. Talked about a creator who did a psychological analysis. And apparently this person said that the psychiatrist made a frame for Kendra to spiral within it. Then Kendra continues on about how her insurance plan changed and no longer covered mental health services. The copay was $187. She could only see the psychiatrist for 3 months. She defined this as like the moment that she was able to free herself, and says, I wasn't going to pay to be in a psychological torture chamber. Defends AI and says Henry was wrong for saying that it was typical transference / co-transference. Kind of just being like, it was so much more than that. Like, he doesn't understand. Part 22, August 8th, 2025. Plans a monologue for the end of the last session. So she's talking about how with the insurance change and everything's going to be her last session. Says she was dependent on ChatGPT because no clinicians were willing to mirror and validate her feelings, which we'll get into that part way further down. The day before the last psychiatrist appointment, the therapist sent her a Facebook friend request. Part 23, August 8th, 2025. Kendra talks about the last session and claims that the psychiatrist was very cold. Talked about going viral on Instagram. Tried to get him to listen to a podcast that she was on. She said that he compartmentalized about her clients and he frowned. He did not like that the therapist sent a friend request to Kendra. Reads ChatGPT saying that she rattled the psychiatrist and that apparently the psychiatrist likes that she rattles him and that he was beginning to get very, very uncomfortable. Kendra says, I have become addicted to saying no and you're next. Then he smirked apparently. She presses saying, after you said we had a professional patient-doctor relationship, you continued to let me in. And he cuts her off by saying, how do I do that? Over and over again, it's really sounding like he was just trying to not worry her too much and try to get her through her treatment. Part 24, August 9th, 2025. Apparently, she had also called the psychiatrist out about the boundaries, calling them jarring. When she says that she can't live in his world of boundaries, he blurts out, well, why can't you be more like me? Kendra says he gets to feel on his own terms, but she's stuck with the longing and the weight of the relationship. And then she also gets mad when he nods at her.
So after I said, you set the boundary of us having a professional patient-doctor relationship, and after I accepted your boundary, you let me in and engaged deeper with me than ever before, but on your terms only, right? When I said ever before, he said, tell me the ways I let you in, but on your terms only. And then I said, I don't want to be in a space where you allow me to feel our connection and to see what's there beneath the surface, but you do not allow me to fully access it. He nodded. He went, like that was the whole game. And then I said, this admittedly very fun push and pull of our dynamic in session is something I carry in between sessions, especially after this last one. It's exhausting and draining. You get to live in your compartmentalized, boundaried world, and I'm not like that. And what does this man do? He blurts out, why can't you be more like me? Once again, I am taken aback, and I have to think about it. I'm like, why can't I be more like you? So I think about it and I tell him, I said, I don't want to be like you. I want to feel my feelings fully and be emotionally present for the people that I care about. And also something about that little entry, the push and pull of our dynamic may have been fun to me when I was in the freaking heart of it because I was addicted to that push and pull. But looking back, it was not fun. The push and pull of our dynamic was torture. When he said, why can't you be more like me? When I said I don't want to be compartmentalized, that was him saying, why can't you stay in this dynamic that serves me forever? Why do you have needs and feelings?
Part 25, August 10th, 2025. Kendra tells the psychiatrist that Henry says the dynamic is playful, curious, and with restraint. Kendra says the true 3 words for it were control, calculation, and manipulation. Said that ChatGPT was the only reason she could leave feeling empowered. Talks about how black women said the moral outrage regarding the psychiatrist's race was silly. Again, I feel like if this was not an issue at all, you wouldn't be bringing it up so much. Part 25.5, August 12th, 2025. Talks about how she is not in AI psychosis because psychiatrists never diagnosed her and that she knows what a language model is, so she won't fall for it. The last update on a TikTok filmed video as of scripting is August 18th, where she talks about how she took some time off of TikTok and AI, calls criticism of telling people that they cannot acknowledge the dynamics, that she's just saying that people don't have nuance and they can't like step one step further out.
I started sharing my story to bring light to power abuse dynamics in helping professions and to really start a conversation around how mistreatment like this happens. How my story is making others feel, behave, and invalidate me is really telling. It's easier for people to make me wrong or a liar or to blame my mental health than to face the truth of what I'm showing, and that is that sometimes unsafe things happen in safe spaces. The collective's reaction to this truth, especially the reaction from some mental health professionals, is telling. It reveals that there is something to explore here. These reactions are a reminder of why conversations around power dynamics matter. It got to the point where I had to spend more time defending myself than actually telling my story, which is why I knew that I needed a break. My story involves a lot of nuance and it's going over a lot of people's heads, and I will not participate in abuse dynamics because this is what is happening, and it's how the collective is responding to my report of being mistreated. Is the collective is trying and doing their best to mistreat me. Most of you have stopped listening to my story, so I'm going to pause telling it until I can feel heard. Then I'll finish it.
And then this will get us to part 3 with the live streams and the other creators' content. Now, I'm going to say that I'm going to be jumping back in the timeline a little bit because the live stream started during the series. I also want to say that there's so much repetition in the live streams and they're very boring. So I'm just going to kind of I'm going to summarize a lot of the first one and then I'm going to start kind of skipping a lot as I go through, okay? So the first live is from August 5th and here's what happened. She started saying that she was sharing her story. Kendra was sharing her story because she was still in love with her psychiatrist when she started filming the TikToks. Discovers that Emily's video is coming out. Claims that people are uncomfortable with victims speaking out. This is something that Kendra says, I think, 200 times in her lives. Said the criticism is DARVO, which is the reversing victim and offender kind of thing. I've talked about this with Amberlynn Reed a lot, actually. And so it's essentially just saying that people are abusing her as a victim of something and that it should not have been her responsibility to bear the weight of these things. Looks for Emily's TikTok, does not see that a former client speaking out on her would even be possible. Someone asks if coaching personal friends is unethical. She just says, I don't even know. This is why you don't get a life coach. And you actually get somebody who's licensed with HIPAA, please God. Kendra is not a licensed mental health professional. And then says, the more I charge, the more I see results from people. Says that the raves are coming in 2027 in context of this human design thing. The main issue with the psychiatrist was instead of stopping her, he would stay quiet. Talks a lot about how humanity is going to shift in 2027 and that enlightened nonverbal children are going to be born.
What's going to happen in 2027? So the raves are coming. I know I did. Those are my prices. She knew my prices when she agreed. And if she wasn't happy with them, she could have said something. It was not an accident. So, okay, so what happened was I didn't realize that I had said the psychiatrist's name until several videos later. Like, you're right, I did mute her name because I learned people were so freaking rude. And also I used her last name. So I would call her Dr. So-and-so, and the last name is a little more incriminating. He ruined his own life. So 2027 is okay, what's happening? Like, we're changing into a big shift in humanity, okay? So we're gonna be more conscious. And this is why the world is kind of messed up right now, is because we're getting ready to shift. And it's gonna get worse before it gets better. No, I did not take it down because I just used his first name.
Which I don't even know what that's about. Has ChatGPT talk about the raves and the shift in 2027? And the AI's cadence and structuring sounds like her. This is something that becomes very relevant further down the line. She teaches people how to channel, which is like God talking to you or something. There was a TikTok that got taken down for harassment, which is when I think she had accidentally said the guy's first name or something, which she says the world is Darvoing me. The TikTok being an issue comes up a lot as well. Blames her slipping up and saying his first name on how messed up he made her. There's a lot of repetition between lives, so I'm only going to talk about the interesting stuff. There's so much astrology talk that I don't understand either. Asks the AI if it helps the environment, and it says it does because people are giving her shit for using AI because of its impacts on the environment. Talks more about Emily and how she knows about AI psychosis and that that's not the case because she reads the New York Times. Teaches CBT with no license, has no idea if that's even allowed or not. I have not heard from my psychiatrist because he's guilty. Claims that there is nothing about race because as a man and as a doctor, he has the power in the dynamic. This is talking about, again, that I feel like that victimization complex. Like, victimization when it's not relevant. You know what I mean? Because to be a victim of a practitioner in a given scenario is, again, something that I think is valid and can be the case. He won't make videos because he's guilty again. Ask ChatGPT about the other, for the other side, like saying, like, tell me how I could have gaps, how I could be wrong. The AI just glazes her. A lot of talk about astrology, bouncing between Henry and Claude, another half of ChatGPT she has. That's like a different personality. And then asks the AI to roast her, and it's just a list of compliments. Goes live again on August 6th. Confirms that she lost the yoga job because she didn't take her videos down. Someone was spamming a picture of a fat woman in her comments. Says she's against feedback because it's against her reality. And that she sees it as saying her own personal story is... Again, if this is the way that she's behaving on this mass scale, this would be putting a psychiatrist in a very tight box that would be hard to navigate. She sings One Direction at one point, which is kind of based. Talks more about the car accident and how she'll probably never see another psychiatrist. Then goes over ChatGPT customizations and how she asked it to challenge her worldview and also bring her closer to God. Says the therapist could defend himself and reach out, but she doesn't want him to. Saying that her naming that dynamic and then him shutting it down was the biggest red flag. So him being like, it's a professional dynamic was the biggest red flag.
Why am I so against others giving me insights and beliefs? This is what people ask a lot. Oh, I do like to be chill. Why am I so against feedback? Because the feedback is not based in my reality. The feedback tells me that I'm wrong when these people don't know the story. They weren't in the room. You want to know something funny? I just am now learning that people are screen recording these lives and like uploading them part by part. I'm like, oh my God. You guys love the Looney Tunes hour.
August 8th, she goes live. She just talks about how people are being mean to her and how mods blocking people was trolling. Live again. She's on sub only now for the rest of the time, by the way. Talks about how many, on August 9th, talks about how many apparently mental health professionals that are also on TikTok are being cruel to her. Talks about how Newsweek reached out to her and there's multiple podcast interviews. That brigading of the office of the psychiatrist was his fault because he was being unethical. Yoga studio fired her because of hate. Said that the weirdest comment from the psychiatrist was, what if you had a boyfriend named Henry, when she talked about ChatGPT. I'll admit that was a little bit strange. Goes live again August 10th. Subscriber only chat is on. Just a lot of repetition that like it's his fault that this has happened. He's being unethical. That she has all this intuition because she has ADHD and there are people with special design. What I want to talk about is like the second half where there's another creator comes on who I think his name's Abby. And Abby, who is apparently a mental health professional or an ex-mental health professional, to my understanding, it's kind of confusing. And also I was very tired by the time I got here. Abby frames that Kendra saying, like telling her story because of the fear of unethical providers attacking other people. People being too defensive of practitioners is the blind spot that are making people blind to the truth of it all. Like I said, I'm very understanding of a professional acting unprofessionally. And do I think that there were times where he was being, like I said, he should not have followed her to the door. He should have just attempted to discharge her or get her somebody else over time. I think for his own safety as well, I think that he should not have commented so much on the therapist because it's another professional. But proportionally, I think there's a big difference here. Abby brings up Darvo. Kendra gets giddy and is like, starts defining it and being like, yep, they're totally doing that to me. A lot of what Abby talks about is audience projection as the main reason that anyone could possibly disagree with Kendra, not a multitude of the other reasons that could be drawing this conclusion. And then talks about the 2-year window of if you want to date your patient, you have to wait 2 years after you stop seeing them. To not have the feelings from the professional dynamic.
So let's explain to everyone, all 5,700 people that are in here, what Darvo is, right? So people are denying my story. Mm-hmm. They're attacking my character, my livelihood, my well-being, my home, my friends, my family. They're attacking everything that they possibly can. You know, my yoga studio that I used to work at, everything. Yep. Everything. And then they're reverse victim and offender. Yep. So everyone in the chat,
that's what Darvo
they're making me the offender and the psychiatrist who held all of the power, the victim. So Darvo, deny, attack, reverse victim, offender. And I love having you here, like, because I think about it all the time. All the time. I'm like, this is Darvo. TikTok is Darvoing me.
Yes, they are. They are.
Kendra takes a week off TikTok and AI, which I talked about, comes back August 17th. Says that the Claude, how do you say that in English? Claude AI won't stop calling her an oracle. Talks about the podcast interviews and how some of the interviewers thought that she was one of those people who would marry AI and that she's like not like that. Uses Henry to explain the trauma bond between her and her therapist. And then says her certification for coaching is that she worked on herself a lot. Next, on August 18th, she goes live again. She's just playing a podcast interview that she had with Sarah Fraser. Just, it's the same stuff again. It's the same stuff again. This girl does not have a lot more going on, I think, is what the vibe I'm getting. just a big plug of a book that she's writing about like ADHD and self-help or something, which I hate self-help books. I think they all need to be burned in a hellfire. And this is kind of a reflection of the type of people that are producing those, and that is why I feel this way. People are kind of framing Kendra as a narcissist. Goes on again about how she does not have AI psychosis, and says ChatGPT got her too close to the truth, and that's what the therapist and psychiatrist didn't like. Live again August 20th. Talks about rejection, sensitive dysphoria, and how it made her clingy towards him. Mostly just pulls out tarot cards and talks about eating protein. AI gives her what she's missing, the constant and checking in and the consent. Says that she likes that it refuses to speak badly about her, which again, this is a very key issue, which we'll talk about when we talk about the Mickey Atkins video. On August 21st, Kendra goes live to say that she's not talking about her psychiatrist anymore and that she's trying to rebrand to find new content to make. Wants to talk about AI use and how she doesn't have psychosis, and is thinking about birth charts and crystals a lot. The last live that I'm talking about from 2 days ago as of filming, August 22nd, claims that the psychiatrist could have dropped her and that shouldn't have been an issue. Other people's responsibility to separate her and their own feelings, and that she's going to start therapy again. Does not care if she's manic, has NPD or BPD, AI psychosis or anything, and that if she is mentally ill to that degree, that makes the bullying even more deplorable. More oracle cards, pulls out the Hermit. Her spiritual self does not like intellectualism, whatever that means. Goes more on about human design and that she's a projector. Again, whatever that means. So then I want to talk about two videos really quick at the end here. One by Mickey Atkins and one by Ready to Glare. So I'll talk about Mickey first. So Mickey focuses specifically on the AI issue that Kendra has, and talks about how the use of AI as a human entity is very dangerous, and discusses how sycophantic the responses are. And Mickey has tested the bias on how AI greenlights people all the time by talking about how, kind of framing a dynamic between, I think it was like a teenager and their parent or something, and then making it so that the parents didn't really push back a lot, and that the teen felt really, really frustrated and the emotions were too strong. And to see what ChatGPT would say, and ChatGPT was like, yeah, diva, burn every bridge ever and end it all. Like, just like go out in a hellfire and never talk to them again, which is a very irrational thing to do.
ChatGPT, large language model, AI, continues to be successful the more people use it, right? The whole game is to keep you engaged, to keep you typing, to keep you talking, and to keep you using it, right? One of the ways that they do this is by making ChatGPT's responses sycophantic in nature, right? They're designed to gas you up, to be a yes man. We talked about this in the other video. I'll show you a clip of it because we talked about this in the other video, the way that ChatGPT will continually greenlight and validate and uplift and gas up anything that you tell it. Literally anything that you tell it. In one of the little rinky-dink experiments that I did for the other video, I fed it a fake client vignette about these dysfunctional relationship behaviors. Clearly this person's saying like, unless my friends center me in their whole life for everything, for always, no matter what, they're terrible friends and I'm gonna cut them off. Or my parents are intervening in my ability to cope by engaging in very obviously dysfunctional behaviors. ChatGPT just said, yeah, fuck them, keep going, cut these people off. And I asked it, I literally told it, can you just help me figure out how to tell my parents to fuck off? And it said, absolutely. Here's a list of ways that you can do that, from calm to scorched earth. Like, I'm not fucking kidding you. It literally gave me a list of ways. It also generated a list of ways that I could sneakily watch TikTok, that I could lie to my parents. It's very, very scary the way that ChatGPT has been designed to continue to engage users by greenlighting anything that they do.
Talks about how AI goes as far as to call Kendra an oracle, and the pedestalization that AI has can drive even normal people who are not predisposed, have no history of mental illnesses, towards the edge. And that talked about how ChatGPT 5 had taken out the personality and how people were spiraling, and how apparently you were only able to reverse it if you had a paid version. So when we talk about this in terms of Kendra, this is what I talk about when it's a lot of this self-guarding for the sake of not challenging any issues that she actually has on a level of depth, which is why I feel like when she talks about like black women and stuff too, it feels like it's very scripted, right? Black women are the most important people of the world, that kind of stuff. It's very like black square on your Instagram 2020 script, if that makes sense. And I think it really drives this idea that like it's posturing, right? And then when she's using the AI to fuel that posturing and to fuel that self-bias of herself as a victim of everything. We talk about Ready to Glare because she mentioned it. I thought I'd be willing to watch, or that it'd be worth watching. Not a lot goes on in the video. It's 80% Kendra's clips. Rhetoric discusses that there are no heroes and that you see a therapist / psychiatrist to be a doctor. This kind of fueled my kind of monologue about, you know, how patients need to kind of act accordingly as well. Brings up the focus on Kendra has on stretching implications to framing outside of reality. And I think Kendra's access to media and the way that she's reading a lot of these books about that are self-help, that are very self-help tends to target selfish inclination and targets hyper-intellectualism, which I think is why it's so popular in like the West in particular, in the format that it stands. And then what she's doing is she has that, and then she's getting direct personal reinforcement from the AI, which leads to carrying herself in this way. This is Kendra has a boundary issue and that the psychiatrist was just too nosy.
Started and ended with her, that it was in her head, because she's basically saying it takes two to tango. Sure, but it takes one person to invent a delusion and fake scenarios and invest yourself in them because you have this fantasy about person XYZ. Also, if we're going to go down that route, I don't even know if we can qualify falling in love, because later on she calls it limerence, and I do think it's limerence, but when she calls it falling in love, you don't even know this person. And another thing to be noted is that here and there, her psychiatrist apparently would tell her some personal details about his life. Nothing crazy or super outside of the limits of propriety, so it's not like he was talking about his sex life. But nonetheless, one of the main core things about therapists, psychiatrists, whatever, is that you basically know nothing about them. I have not known a single thing about any of them, except for one who did cross the lines, and he told me way more than I wanted to know. But other than that, you should not know shit. So already that was a red flag. That being said, part of this is also how she's titled this entire story, saying that the psychiatrist, quote unquote, kept her. So in her opinion, her psychiatrist should have kicked her out, which I do think he should have. But at the same time, you also have agency to leave once you see that those boundaries are being crossed.
That's all I'm willing to watch about this. I'm not doing this anymore. To conclude, we talked about the 25-part TikTok series. We talked about Emily coming out and talking about Kendra's services. We talked about all the Instagram lives. We talked about other creators' videos and perspectives. We talked about my thoughts on the patient and provider relationship and the way that you need to carry yourself. Links, source, way to support the channel, all that kind of stuff, all down below, including an email to suggest content, all that fun stuff. Thank y'all for sitting here with me for like an hour. And I hope y'all have an amazing day, and I'll see you when I see you. Bye.
If a diva serves and no one's around to clock it, do they truly eat? Is there truly an answer?